An emperor can sleep inside a city that moves only because a camp raiser is awake in the dark field ahead of him. Tonight your argument is not with imperial policy, but with a tent peg that has met hard earth and developed principles. If this kind of evening genuinely suits you, leave a quiet like or subscribe and tell me where you are listening and the local time there. Let the room grow dim around you, settle into a comfortable position and keep hold of this rope. You are in northern South Asia during the Mughal centuries, standing with an advance camped crew before dawn, and your ordinary job is already refusing to be ordinary. The canvas must rise square, tight, and in the proper place before the travelling court reaches the halt. You brace 1 foot behind the line and pull. The peg gives nothing. Around you, shaded lamps reveal poles laid on the ground, rolled screens, coils of rope, and adults waiting for the first corner to be fixed. This field was open yesterday. By sunrise it must contain the repeated shape of an imperial enclosure. A wrong angle will not remain a private mistake. It will travel through the next screen, the next roof, the next passage, until a whole section stands where another office expected to be. You loosen your grip, shift the iron point by the width of 2 fingers, and raise the mallet again. You set your heel behind the rope and test the line again. It is still wrong, but now it is wrong by less. The far stake sits a little too close to the shallow dip where rainwater once collected, and the cord drifts toward it as though the field has offered a helpful shortcut. The field has offered no such thing. You signal for the stake to move. A shaded lamp rests beside the coil. 1 worker lifts it, while another loosens the line. You take 3 steps toward the firmer patch, judge the angle from knee height, and stop. From here, the intended corner meets the central marker cleanly. The change is small enough to look fussy, and large enough to save the next crew from raising a crooked wall. Nobody is improvising a charming collection of tents. Passages must stay open. Screens must meet. The section beyond yours must begin from the place where yours ends. A mistaken handspan can travel through several bays before canvas makes the error obvious. The stake goes down again. You pull until the cord straightens, then ease it by a finger's width. Across the dark field, other lamps move in short lines as separate crews make similar corrections. Their work does not look like a city yet. It looks like adults taking the ground seriously. You test the rope once more. This time the line answers with an even pull. The survey marker is a plain stake with a knot tied at the height of your thumb. Beside it stands the adult who chose this patch after the advance party examined water, access, slope, and the direction from which the court would arrive. The ground is usable. Usable is not the same as agreeable. 3 stakes mark a rough corner. Loose soil lies on one side, a hard ridge on the other, and a shallow runnel crosses the space where a screen wants to stand. The field has supplied several acres and not one level opinion. The records that bring us here require care. Abul Fazl wrote official praise for Akbar's court. European visitors wrote for distant readers, sometimes repeating gossip or reaching for spectacle. Independent accounts agree on the 2-camp system, so that mechanism is unusually secure. Their dazzling totals for people, animals and tents are much less secure. Nor should Akbar, Shah Jahan and Aurangzeb be blended into one unchanging court. Practice shifted with rain, route, season, and the empire's changing reach. You are a farish, a worker responsible for tents, carpets, and floor furnishings. The term covers practical labor, not a decorative role. You return to the marker because the next rope still needs a place. After comparing both corners, you move 1 iron point toward firmer earth. The worker opposite takes up the new pull. The rough angle begins to become deliberate. You lay a knotted measuring cord from the marker toward the central enclosure. The enclosure is not visible, but its position has already been fixed by the survey party. Your section therefore has an address before it has a roof. The cord passes under your thumb. At each knot, a worker waits with a peg, a mallet, or a coil of rope. You call the distances quietly enough that nearby crews can hear their own leaders. Noise does not improve accuracy, and accuracy is the only thing that will prevent the outer screens from wandering across a service lane. A cartwheel turns beyond the lamps. Its driver wants the open strip you are protecting. You hold the cord low until the cart has passed, then lift it again. The interruption costs half a minute. Running a guy rope across the route would cost considerably more, especially when the first water carriers arrive with skins hanging from shoulder poles. The cord reaches the next stake. You sight back toward the marker and ask for one adjustment. The worker moves the peg no farther than the width of 2 fingers. From a distance, this would be invisible. Here, it restores the relation between your bay and the one that will join it. Poles lie on the ground in ordered rows. Rolled screens wait beside them. The city is still separated into objects, but the measured line tells every object where it will become useful. You secure the cord and leave its knots uncovered for the next team. The first baggage bundles reach your section on camelback. Rolled cloth hangs on either side of each saddle, with ropes and smaller pieces tucked above. The animals kneel, the loads come down, and the ground acquires 2 careful rows of equipment. This is the pushkana, the advance establishment sent ahead with tents and service equipment. One complete camp remains behind with the travelling court, while another is being raised here. The word sounds administrative. On the ground, it means someone has carried a duplicate roof through the night. You check each bundle against the needs of the bay. Screens first, upright poles beside them. Roof cloth farther inward, where it will remain clean until the supports are ready. Floor coverings stay rolled. A man at the far end starts to untie the wrong bundle, and you stop him before an interior hanging is dragged into dust meant for an outer wall. The Emperor's portable capital has begun with a pile that looks remarkably unconvinced. Yet every roll belongs to a sequence. If the sequence is kept, the pile will become enclosure, passage, audience space, household room, office and store. If the sequence is lost, it becomes a great deal of cloth requiring explanations at sunrise. A camel rises after unloading and shakes its neck. The empty saddle creaks. The driver leads the animal toward water while your crew lifts the first screen bundle onto a clean mat. Behind you, the occupied camp still stands. Ahead of it, this duplicate has begun. You sort the remaining pieces by the order in which hands will need them. Long poles go parallel to the measuring line. Short crosspieces lie at right angles. Coils of thick guy rope sit apart from the thinner lacing cord, and spare pegs are placed where a carpenter can reach them without stepping through a rising wall. The distinction matters. The moving establishment is not one undivided heap of imperial possessions. It is equipment divided by function, carried by different people, and assembled in a sequence learned through repetition. A roof cloth cannot sensibly arrive in the hands of 6 people, while its poles remain under 3 carpets. You turn one bundle so its ties face outward. Another worker copies the choice along the row. Soon each roll can be opened without disturbing its neighbor. The improvement is modest, but it changes the rhythm of the next hour. People will lift rather than search. Lantern light reaches only the nearest objects. Beyond it, calls and answering pulls show that other sections are advancing. A pole rises somewhere to your left, disappears, then returns at a better angle. You hear a mallet farther away, and the slow complaint of a cart being backed into place. Your own poles wait in a straight line. You run a hand across the nearest one, checking for a split that might widen under strain. It is sound. You signal for the first pair to be carried to the corner, leaving the passage behind them clear. The first peg meets the hard ridge and stops. You strike again. The mallet jumps in your hand. The peg moves scarcely at all, and the metal point bends just enough to make the next blow useless. You pull it free and hold it beneath the lamp. The ground has rejected the proposal without offering amendments. A second worker tests the hole with a narrow iron bar, while you choose a replacement from the spare bundle. The bar finds hard-packed gravel below the surface. Driving straight down will merely produce another bent point. The crew includes people with distinct skills. Administrative descriptions name tent workers, carpenters, leather workers, pioneers, and many other occupations that kept the establishment moving. Here, the distinction is practical. You know the line. The carpenter knows what the iron and timber will endure. He arrives, turns the damaged peg in his palm, and asks for the rope angle. Together you shift the anchoring point slightly outward, where the peg can enter at a slant and still hold the intended pull. He gives you a heavier mallet with a face that sits squarely on the iron head. The first stroke sounds dull. The second sinks the point. By the fifth, the peg stands firm enough to take the rope. You return the lighter mallet and keep the bent iron aside for repair. The plan has not changed. One tool, one angle, and one adult's judgment have changed instead. The carpenter does not leave immediately. He watches while you loop the guy rope over the new peg and increase the pull in stages. Iron that holds under one sharp blow may still creep when a broad panel catches the wind. You crouch until your eye is level with the cord. The far worker eases his side. The peg shifts no more than a grain's width, then settles. The carpenter taps the head once, not to drive it farther, but to hear whether the ground beneath has loosened. Satisfied, he returns the heavier mallet to his shoulder. This small exchange reveals how the camp could be raised at scale without becoming a single confused labor force. Specialized crews did not work alone. They met at the points where wood, iron, leather, cloth, animals, and measured ground depended on one another. A pole team approaches, carrying its load at shoulder height. You clear them past the repaired anchor and warn them about the abandoned hole. One man covers it with loose soil, so a foot will not find it later. The damaged peg goes into a basket with split wedges and worn loops, all objects for another worker rather than rubbish. You re-tension the rope. Its pull now runs cleanly from corner to ground. The carpenter is already answering a call from the next bay. His part in your problem has lasted only a few minutes, which is precisely why the larger work can continue. 5 paces beyond the hard ridge, the ground changes character. The next peg enters too easily. With one strike it sinks, with the second it leans, and when the rope is drawn tight, the surrounding soil crumbles toward the hole. Soft earth is more agreeable, which is not the same as useful. You release the line before the peg can tear free. A worker brings a short crosspiece of timber and a spade. Together you open a shallow trench, lay the timber across the direction of pull, and loop the rope around it before covering it again. The load will now spread through a wider patch of earth instead of depending on a single point. While the trench is open, a baggage cart approaches the lane. You hold the loose rope on the ground and wave the driver through. Wheels pass close enough to shake crumbs of soil into the cut. Only after the cart clears do you bury the crosspiece and take up tension. The line rises slowly. You watch the surface for movement. Nothing lifts. The buried timber remains unseen, which is fitting. Much of the moving city will depend on arrangements that its later occupants never notice. A second guy rope is set at a wider angle to share the strain. The panel it will support has not yet been raised, but its resistance is already being planned. You test both lines in turn. Hard ground demanded force. This patch demands distribution. The prescribed layout survives because the method can change without moving the intended wall. You square the corner before any canvas can hide it. 2 cords run along the intended sides. A third crosses the diagonal between opposite stakes. If the measurements agree, the corner is true. If they do not, the most impressive roof in the empire will still be standing over a mistake. The diagonal comes up short. You ask one worker to hold the central stake, while another loosens the outer point. The adjustment is small, but the poles waiting nearby make patience urgent. Once those poles rise, every correction will require more hands. You measure again. This time the knot meets the stake. The crew brings the first uprights forward. Their feet are set beside the line rather than on it, leaving the cord visible for one last check. You walk the 2 sides, counting intervals, and looking for the subtle bow that appears when a rope crosses uneven ground. At the shallow runnel, you lift the cord over a flat stone so the measure reflects the intended horizontal line rather than the dip. The outer stake moves a final finger's width. The diagonal still agrees. You give the signal. Poles are raised one at a time and steadied by ropes before the next begins. The corner that existed only in knots now appears above the ground. It is not yet a room or a wall, but it is square. The people in the adjoining bay can take their own measure from it without asking you to explain what went wrong. You lift the first kanat, a portable cloth screen used to make walls and enclosed passages. The word is glossed once. The work explains it thereafter. 6 adults take the laced upper edge, while 2 others steady the poles. At first the screen is only a heavy red length gathered in folds. On your count, hands rise. The cloth opens, catches a little air, and pulls unevenly toward the outer corner. You ask the middle pair to hold while the end pair gives back half a step. The upper lacing comes level. Screens like these establish boundaries before interior tents and furnishings are placed. Their position tells later crews where public approach ends, where service movement turns, and where more private parts of the enclosure begin. Privacy here is practical architecture, not invitation to outsider fantasy. You fasten the first edge to the corner pole. A worker passes the lacing through prepared loops, pulling each tie firm but not hard enough to pucker the seam. Another checks the lower edge so it does not drag in damp soil. The wall rises one fastening at a time. From far away it may look continuous. At arm's length it is seams, patches, cords and hands adjusting the pull. You press your palm to the cloth and wait through a breath. The pressure remains even. The first screen now stands where an empty line lay minutes before. The next screen joins the first by a laced edge. One worker feeds the cord through paired loops while another keeps the 2 cloth margins aligned. You receive the loose end, pull until the seam closes, and pass it onward. The fastening is deliberately repetitive. No single loop carries the whole wall. Many small ties share the strain and allow a damaged portion to be opened, repaired, or replaced without undoing the entire enclosure. The principle is simple enough to disappear once the cloth stands. A lantern travels along the seam with the worker checking it. In the low light, his hand finds a skipped loop that the eye missed. He calls you back. The cord is withdrawn by 2 holes, threaded correctly, and tightened again. The correction takes less than a minute. More panels wait on the ground. Their rolled weight has been carried, unloaded, sorted, and protected from mud before reaching this moment. You do not need a spectacular count to understand the labor. One screen already requires several adults to lift, align, lace, and anchor. The moving city multiplies that ordinary effort across many assigned spaces. The joined cloth gives a soft pull as the wind shifts. Both panels respond together. You follow the seam downward, check the final knot, and tuck the loose cord where a passing foot cannot catch it. The wall has gained length without gaining a visible break. A gust arrives while the third panel is halfway up. The cloth swells toward you, the upper edge snaps tight, and one pole begins to lean before the rope team can answer. You call for the panel to come down. The order seems backward when dawn is approaching, but a half-raised screen has more appetite for wind than a folded one. The workers lower their hands in sequence. Cloth settles onto waiting arms instead of dragging across the ground, and the leaning pole returns upright. Nobody has fallen. No rope has parted. The brief failure remains what it should be. Information about the windward side. You move the guy lines farther apart and add a temporary rope to the middle of the panel. A worker carries the loose cloth into a shallow fold so the wind cannot fill its entire width at once. The crew rests its arms while you inspect the corner anchor. The buried crosspiece in the softer ground has held. When the next lull comes, you raise only the first third. The middle rope takes strain. Another third follows. The final edge goes up after both poles are steady. This time the cloth does not lunge. It rises in smaller decisions, The panel reaches the lacing line and is secured. A passing torch makes the surface glow briefly, then moves away. What looked like lost time has prevented a larger collapse and taught the crew how the remaining windward screens must be handled. The windward ropes are reset before the next panel leaves the ground. You widen their spacing, assign one adult to each line, and ask a third to watch the middle pole rather than the cloth. Fabric is dramatic. Poles are informative. The first line takes strain. The second answers. You touch the pole and feel a faint vibration, then signal for the left rope to ease. The tremor diminishes. When both pulls balance, the upright no longer argues with the wind. The panel rises in stages, using the method learned from the gust. Lower hands feed cloth upward, while the upper team keeps the laced edge level. At each pause, the rope workers adjust. The process is slower than one great lift, and much faster than rebuilding a flattened bay. Along the neighboring section, another crew copies the wider spacing. No formal instruction travels between you. They saw what the gust did and what the correction changed. The top edge reaches its place. You fasten it, walk to the outer peg, and put your weight against the guy line. It holds. The panel bows inward slightly, then returns. The wall is straighter on the second attempt. More importantly, the method is now shared. The next screens can rise with fewer shouted corrections and less cloth in the air at once. You gather the temporary middle rope, coil it loosely, and keep it nearby. The wind has not agreed to leave. A messenger arrives from the approach lane with news of a delayed cart. It carries cross pieces and a heavier roof cloth needed for the next interior structure. A wheel sank at the edge of the track, and the team is freeing it. The missing pieces create an open bay in the sequence. You cannot raise what is not present, but neither must the entire section stop. You move the available workers to the screens on either side, where lower lacing, ground cloth, and secondary ropes can be completed. This kind of flexibility matters in a moving establishment. Equipment travels in loads, and loads arrive according to animals, wheels, roads, water, and the small accidents of handling. A prescribed layout does not mean every object appears on command. It means the crew knows which tasks can change order without changing the final relation. You mark the missing bay with 2 crossed cords, so no one stacks baggage in it. A pole bundle is shifted aside, leaving a clear route from the lane. The roof team checks the pieces already delivered and sets out the lifting ropes in advance. Far off, the delayed cart gives a wooden groan. Lanterns move toward it. You hear a call, then the slower roll of wheels returning to firm ground. The cart is still several minutes away. Your crew has used those minutes to finish work that would otherwise have waited. When the cross pieces arrive, the open bay will be ready to receive them. The empty bay begins pulling on the sections beside it. Their ropes are designed to share tension through a completed line, and the gap leaves one finished screen with more freedom than it should have. You set a temporary brace from its upper corner to a spare peg inside the enclosure. The brace crosses no passage and can be removed as soon as the missing structure rises. A second rope holds the neighboring pole. The solution is not elegant, which is irrelevant. It prevents the open space from widening and keeps both completed edges on their measured marks. A baggage group approaches with carpet rolls. The leading porter sees the crossed cords and turns before entering the bay. You guide the group around the outer lane, where the loads can reach their assigned mat without passing under loose ropes. The delayed cart comes closer. One lantern reveals mud on a wheel rim, and another shows adults walking beside the bullocks, easing the vehicle over uneven ground. Nobody tries to make up the lost minutes by driving faster among the tent lines. You test the temporary brace. It has taken some strain, but the main stake remains steady. The screen edge is still square to the measuring cord. When the cart finally stops, the cross pieces can be unloaded directly into the marked opening. The first timber comes down. You hold the brace while the roof team carries it through. The gap has been kept useful, rather than allowed to become a problem for every neighboring crew. Water carriers reach the service side. before the interior rooms are furnished. Some balance skins over their shoulders. Others carry jars in slings or guide animals bearing larger vessels. They follow the open lane you protected, then stop at the edge assigned for supply work. Water is not a scenic detail. Workers need it through the night. Animals need it at halts. Cooking, washing, and the ordinary care of a traveling household all depend on where it can be brought, stored, and guarded from traffic. You show the lead carrier the point where the service passage turns behind the outer screen. He checks the ground for a level place and sets the first jars in a row. Their position immediately changes movement around them. Porters leave more room at the corner. A cook's assistant asks which route will remain open. The answer is now visible. The carriers spread damp mats under the vessels to steady them and catch spills. One cracked jar is set aside. Nothing is poured into it merely because it completed the journey. You return to the screen line and view the jars through the opening. They mark the practical side of the enclosure more clearly than a painted sign could in darkness. Adults carrying ropes and timber avoid the row without being told. The moving court could keep functioning because shelter and service arrive together. Here, that broad claim has become a line of water vessels, standing safely beyond the path of a cart. Torchbearers begin moving between the sections as the field grows busier. Their lights help workers read knots and clear passages, but an open flame near loose cloth is assistance with conditions attached. You meet the first pair at the entrance to your bay. One carries the torch high. The other walks slightly ahead, watching the ground. You direct them along the outside of the guy ropes, rather than beneath the half-laced roof edge. A falling spark touches bare earth and dies. Another lands on a damp patch beside the water jars. The bearers keep moving. Their route has been chosen so that neither spark can reach folded textiles. Several accounts describe torch-lit lanes, dust, ropes, and crowded movement after dark. The practical combination is clear. Workers required light, and open flame had to be managed among fabric, animals, and people. You return at once to the nearest problem. A loose cord lies across the torch route. You lift it, pass it behind the pole, and tie it higher. The pair comes back, carrying light for the delayed roof team. This time their path is clear. The torch shows the crosspiece entering the open bay and the temporary braces holding both sides. Once the timber is set, the flame continues onward. Useful light has revealed the work without becoming another piece of it that must be repaired. The neighboring section leader arrives with a measuring cord in his hand and a disagreement in his face. His outer line has reached the width marked for your bay. One of you has crept across the boundary. Neither section can simply ignore the other. Screens must meet, passages must remain wide enough, and interior structures depend on the shared edge. You compare the knots on both cords. His count begins from a marker nearer the central enclosure. Yours begins from the outer corner. The totals should agree. They do not. The two of you walk the line in opposite directions, checking each stake rather than defending your first opinion. At the shallow runnel, your cord passes over the flat stone placed earlier. His cord has slipped beside it and followed the dip, shortening the measured distance. The fault belongs to no person's character. It belongs to a cord resting in the wrong place. You lift his measure onto the stone and count again. The boundary returns to its intended position, but one of his stakes must move. His workers loosen the screen. Your crew holds its own edge steady, while the iron point shifts a handspan outward. The corrected cords meet. The passage between sections remains open, and neither enclosure loses its prescribed width. The other leader gives the knot a final look, then nods. A large court can produce elaborate hierarchy. At ground level, two adults have just protected it by checking a piece of string instead of winning an argument. The moved boundary leaves your outer screen slightly slack. You return to the corner, take up the extra length, and ask the worker at the far end to hold while you retie the lower fastening. The correction travels through the cloth. A wrinkle disappears near the middle pole. The laced seam straightens. More important, the edge once again gives the next interior crew a reliable reference. They are waiting with poles for a covered passage. One asks whether the revised line is final. You walk the chord, check the stone over the runnel, and answer yes. Only then do they bring their first upright forward. The episode with the neighbouring section has cost time, but it has removed uncertainty. Everyone who works from this edge can now do so without allowing extra width for a possible later change. You retension the main guy rope in 2 pulls, pausing between them so the anchoring point can settle. The buried crosspiece remains firm. The hard ground peg at the other corner has not shifted. A worker smooths the lower screen away from the lane. Another gathers the released cord and hangs it from a peg instead of leaving it underfoot. The bay is again square, continuous, and ready to support the structures within it. You step back far enough to see both corrected sections together. Their seam is not perfectly beautiful, but it is where it belongs. For the adults arriving with the next load, that is the only kind of perfection that matters. Only after the roof and outer screens are secure do the floor coverings come forward. Carpet rolls have waited on clean mats, tied against dust and kept out of the lanes. Now their bearers carry them through the finished opening. You guide the first roll to the inner edge and turn it so it can open away from the wall. 4 adults take the weight. The carpet moves across the ground in a slow red curve, covering peg holes, flattened weeds, and the shallow marks left by earlier feet. Furnishing follows structure. Reversing that order would place valuable cloth beneath ladders, muddy soles, falling cord, and every adjustment still required above. The sequence protects objects and people at once. The bearers stop before the carpet reaches a service passage. You check the line, then ask them to angle the final length inward. The passage remains bare and easy to recognize. A mat is placed at the entrance where dust can be left before anyone crosses the larger covering. Another roll waits outside, but you do not call it in until the first lies flat. 2 workers smooth a ridge with their palms. Air escapes toward the open edge. The surface settles. The space still lacks most of its contents, yet its character has changed. Bare field has become an interior floor. The roof team can now remove its temporary lifting ropes without dragging them across the carpet, and the furnishing crew can begin its own ordered work. Toward the accessible side of the central enclosure, another crew raises the broad public audience structure. Under Akbar, descriptions of the camp place the audience space outward, where petitioners, officials, and business could approach without crossing deeper household areas. You are not building that tent, but its position governs your line. Its entrance must face the open approach, and the passage beside your section must feed toward it rather than close across it. The structure grows through the same materials you have handled: poles, ropes, cloth, screens, floor coverings, lamps, and adults taking strain. Its function is grander than a store or sleeping room, but its roof remains subject to wind and its cords remain capable of catching an inattentive foot. A supervisor checks the outward alignment. He asks for your boundary marker, compares it with the audience entrance, and approves the lane between them. Clerks waiting with document chests move closer. Guards take up positions at the open side. Court business could continue while the emperor travelled because procedure was pitched with shelter. The audience space did not float above logistics. It depended on measured ground, clear access, protected records, and workers who had raised the place before its users arrived. You retie one screen where the public lane widens. The knot is ordinary. Beyond it, the moving capital has acquired a place where decisions can be received, recorded, and sent onward. Beyond the public audience space, the enclosure deepens. Other crews take responsibility for more restricted tents, household rooms, stores, and passages. You do not follow them merely because the screens invite curiosity. Relative depth carried meaning. An outward entrance served public approach. Inner routes controlled access and allowed the emperor's household, including traveling women, children, attendants, and service staff, to live and move without becoming scenery for every visitor. Your task is to keep the junction between sections correct. You check that the public lane does not run straight into the screened interior. Instead, it turns beside a guarded opening, while a separate service route reaches the household side. A bundle of bedding arrives and is directed inward. Behind it come covered vessels, folded cloth, and attendants carrying the ordinary possessions of a travelling residence. Nothing about the load needs romantic invention. People require rooms that can be entered, water that can be reached, and routes that do not force private life through public business. You move a loose carpet roll away from the guarded turn. The guard thanks you without leaving his place. A porter carrying a chest now has enough width to pass. The deeper tents remain mostly hidden from your view, but their needs shape the outer plan. Privacy is not emptiness. It is inhabited space protected by screens, staff, and agreed routes. You leave that space to the adults whose work belongs there. Household screens arrive with a crew that has been waiting for the service lane to clear. Their panels are lighter than the broad outer canats, but no less particular about placement. They will form covered approaches and interior divisions where family members and attendants can move. You show the leader the marks left for the passage. One side meets the water route. The other turns toward baggage and kitchen service without opening onto the public audience lane. The crew sets short poles first. Cloth follows, lifted low enough that no flame or roof rope crosses it. An attendant walks the route before the lower ties are finished, checking that a person carrying a vessel can pass without brushing the screen. This is the practical life often lost when outsiders make court households into fantasy. Women travelled because households travelled. Their movement required bedding, transport, privacy, staff, water, food, records, and room to conduct ordinary days. The sources describe such spaces unevenly, so the narration stays with what logistics securely requires. A porter approaches with a covered chest. The passage leader stops him until the final ground loop is tied. Then the chest moves through without entering the public lane. You inspect the junction one last time. The screen blocks the direct view, but it does not block work. Routes meet where they should, separate where they must, and allow inhabited parts of the camp to function without turning their residence into display. A shout comes from the outer approach. A baggage group has taken the narrow lane beside your section instead of the broader route marked for carts. The first load has already reached the guy ropes. You move quickly, not dramatically. The leading animal is stopped before its side bundle catches a line. Porters behind set their rolls down in order, rather than crowding forward. The driver explains that a torch at the intended turn went out. In the dust, the open lane beside your screens looked inviting. It is not wide enough for the whole group to turn among the pegs. You clear a small space behind the first animal. One load is lifted off and carried by hand around the corner. With less width, the animal can back 3 careful steps. A worker holds the nearest rope high, while another guides the saddle beneath it. The group returns to the junction. A fresh torch is placed where the proper route begins, and the baggage proceeds along the broader lane. No cloth tears, no peg comes loose. The correction succeeds because adults stop adding movement until the trapped part can be reversed. You lower the raised guy rope and test its anchor. It has held. The screen edge remains straight. The porters retrieve the set-down rolls and follow their animals. A moving city creates traffic before it creates rest. Its lanes must be legible to tired people arriving in darkness, not merely correct on a survey plan. You send one worker to keep the junction visible until dawn. As the baggage clears, you picture the camp still occupied behind the travelling court. Its audience tent, household screens, kitchens, offices, stores, and sleeping rooms remain standing. People there are completing the evening while their duplicates rise here. The 2 establishments exist at once, separated by a day's movement and linked by the road. This is the least obvious fact and the heart of the system. The emperor does not wait in an empty field while his capital is unpacked around him. He leaves one functioning camp and travels toward another that has been prepared in advance. Peter Mundy, traveling in the 1630s, described the Peshkana going ahead so tents could be ready at the next place. Bernier and Minucci likewise wrote of 2 sets leapfrogging between halts. They differed in detail and often loved a large number, but the duplicated mechanism appears independently. The aside ends. A worker hands you the next rope. You fasten it to the corrected corner and look down the service lane. Water jars stand in order. Household screens close the inner turn. The audience structure faces outward. None of this is identical across every reign or journey, but the principle is clear in this night of work. Behind, another city of cloth is being slept in. Ahead, this one is becoming usable. The road between them carries the court while labour passes around it. The leapfrog continues beyond a single journey. After the emperor and court leave the camp behind, its tents are struck, packed, loaded, and sent forward again. The establishment that served as the occupied city becomes the next advanced city. Roles exchange, cloth does not. You follow the sequence through the objects near you. This screen may shelter people at dawn. Become a role after departure. Travel on an animal or cart, and rise at a later halt while its duplicate is occupied elsewhere. Pegs are pulled, sorted, repaired, and driven again. Carpets exchange ground for baggage and ground once more. The system therefore requires more than 2 inventories. It requires crews who know how to reverse every act of raising. Knots must open. Loads must balance. Parts must remain identifiable after packing. Roads, water, fodder, and arrival order decide whether the next repetition succeeds. A man beside you marks a repaired pole with a small cord, so it will be used in a less demanding position later. The gesture belongs to the future camp, not merely this one. You tighten a seam and imagine the same hands loosening it after the occupants depart. The thought does not diminish the present work. It explains its discipline. A piece placed carelessly now may be difficult to find, fold, or load tomorrow. The moving city advances because each finished enclosure already contains the plan for becoming baggage again. The last main guy rope of your section waits at the outer corner. You wrap it around the peg, take the pull with both hands, and signal across the bay. The rope tightens, the roof edge rises a little, screens straighten along the lane. The carpenter watches the peg, the section leader watches the pole, and you watch the relation between them. Then the line settles. Here is the answer promised at the start. Mughal emperors could sleep in moving cities because 2 complete camp establishments leapfrogged along the route. One remained in use while the other travelled ahead and was raised before the court arrived. The smooth passage from one portable capital to the next depended on adults who measured ground, carried water, handled animals, repaired equipment, guarded lanes, lifted cloth, and worked through the hours when the future occupants slept. The emperor's bed moved because many other people's sleep moved to the wrong end of the day. You do not say any of this aloud. You test the knot, check the peg, and release your hands. The line holds without assistance. Across the section, the last open bay has closed. Carpets lie inside. Public and service routes remain clear. Lamps mark the approach. The enclosure is not complete in every detail, but it can receive the people whose work will finish it after sunrise. The title's romantic image has become a logistics problem, and the logistics problem has become a standing wall. You take a lamp and walk the perimeter. This is not a tour of magnificence. It is a check for mistakes that darkness and haste might have hidden. At the first corner, the hard ground peg remains firm. At the second, the buried crosspiece shows no sign of lifting. The windward panel bows gently and returns. Lower ties are clear of the lane. You pass the water vessels, where a carrier has covered the open jars. The service turn is wide enough for 2 adults with loads. Household screens close the direct view inward, while the guarded passage remains usable. At the public side, the audience entrance faces the open approach. Clerks have begun arranging chests beyond it. A mat catches dust before the carpeted interior. Torchbearers keep to the route established for them. The inspection reveals one loose loop near the repaired boundary. You kneel, dress the knot, and pull the spare length upward. A foot can now pass without finding it. The city is checked as a working place. Can a cart turn? Can a carrier reach water? Can an office receive a packet? Can a household move without crossing public traffic? Can cloth withstand the present wind? Each answer appears in an ordinary arrangement. You return to the outer corner. The lamp has burned lower. Behind the screens, more rooms are taking shape, but your main lines are sound. The field is ready to exchange builders for occupants. The eastern edge of the field begins to pale. Colour returns slowly to the cloth. What seemed black becomes red, cream, and faded brown, each panel showing patches and seams that lamps had concealed. Your crew gathers the tools before arriving traffic fills the lanes. Mallets go into one basket, spare pegs into another. Measuring cords are coiled without losing their knots. The bent iron from the hard ridge is tied apart for repair. Loose timber is removed from the public approach. Temporary braces come down only after the permanent ropes are checked. A worker carries the last crossed warning cord away from the bay where the delayed cart unloaded. Dawn makes the enclosure look settled, but the ground around it records the night. Boot marks cross the soil. Wheel ruts stop beside the baggage mats. Small heaps of earth show where pegs were moved. A damp patch remains beneath the water jars. You brush soil from the measuring cord and wind it around your forearm. The city will soon conceal much of this sequence beneath people, carpets, vessels, records, and routine business. A bird calls beyond the field. Nobody pauses to admire it. The first riders are expected. You walk the outer lane once more, collecting a discarded loop and a broken wooden wedge. When your hands are empty, the approach is clear. The pale light now reaches the roofs that did not exist when the work began. Hooves sound on the road before the riders appear. The rhythm is quick and even, unlike the slower carts and loaded animals that came through the night. A mounted messenger reaches the outer marker, sees the open approach, and turns correctly without asking. A second rider follows toward the public side. Their confidence is the first test made by people who did not watch the camp rise. You step away from the lane. The messenger passes the water turn, the guarded screen, and the broad audience entrance as though the route had been familiar for years. In truth, it has been familiar for minutes. More riders arrive carrying instructions for the day staff. One dismounts near the clerk's chests. Another continues inward under guidance. The prescribed relationships do what stone streets usually do. They allow strangers to predict where a function will be found. A worker beside you smiles at the first correct turn. It is the nearest thing the crew receives to applause, and considerably more useful. The road behind the riders has begun to brighten with dust. Larger groups will follow. You check that the last tool basket is clear, then lean the measuring cord against the handover post. The city is ready not because every object is in place, but because movement can enter it without undoing the work. The messengers have found their destinations. The next arrivals will find adults already waiting to receive them. The day staff take over section by section. You show their leader the hard ground corner, the buried anchor, the repaired boundary, and the windward ropes set wider than usual. He listens with one hand on the main line. The handover is brief because the work itself is visible. Water belongs at the service turn. The public approach remains open. The household passage is screened. Spare cord hangs at the marked pole. The damaged peg has gone to repair. He asks about the temporary middle rope. You point to its coil and explain that it may be needed if the wind strengthens. He assigns one adult to keep it near. Your authority ends as his begins. This is not a ceremony. It is an exchange of responsibility between people who understand that a tent standing now will continue changing under sun, wind, traffic, and use. A clerk enters with two assistants carrying a chest. The day leader guides them around a guy rope. A carpet worker follows. The section is already functioning while the last details are being completed. You release the measuring cord into the leader's hand. For most of the night, every decision here came back to you. Now questions pass around you towards someone who has slept at a more convenient hour. You step outside the enclosure. The line remains square without your attention. That independence is the final proof that the handover has worked. Early officials enter a capital that was open ground a few hours ago. They come with papers, attendants, covered vessels, and the practiced expectation that the correct spaces will be waiting. At the public side, guards direct them toward the audience structure. Clerks open chests. Water carriers refill smaller jars. A household porter disappears behind the screened turn with bedding balanced on his shoulder. Nobody sees the order in which the place was made. The first failed peg has vanished into a repair basket. The gust that lowered a panel has left no mark. The delayed cart is now merely a cart standing where its load was needed. Finished order conceals its own sequence. That concealment is part of success. Occupants can use the camp without learning every compromise that allowed it to stand. You watch from outside the lane. One official pauses to brush dust from his shoe before stepping onto the entrance mat. Another asks a guard for the register tent and receives an immediate direction. Their ordinary business resumes inside cloth walls. The movement of the court may appear effortless from this side of sunrise. You know the effort has not disappeared. It has been converted into clear passages, taut ropes, covered floors, supplied rooms, and adults ready at their stations. A final baggage animal passes you and turns correctly. The city accepts it. Your crew no longer needs to intervene. You sit beside the rope coil after the handover, too tired at first to decide whether the ground is hard or merely honest. The eastern sky has turned pale enough to show the whole enclosure, its lines square, its passages open, its screens standing where the survey cord said they should stand. Day workers move through the section with the confidence of people entering a place that already has a purpose. They check a mat, lift a vessel, carry a register chest inward, and ask for no account of the night. Your palms remain marked by rope. A carpenter nearby rubs his wrist. Two farishes lean against a folded bundle that will not be needed until the next change. None of you has slept at the convenient end of the day. That is the title's quiet answer made visible. The emperor can ride from one functioning capital to another because the advance establishment has traveled first, and because adults here have exchanged darkness, strength, and attention for his seamless arrival. The first riders pass the outer line. They see a correct entrance, not the bent peg that began it. They see cloth walls, not the argument with hard soil. The finished place belongs to its occupants now. You let the rope coil rest against your ankle, lower your head for a moment, and feel the oddness of having built a city that greets everyone except its builders. You take a sealed packet from the record clerk and shield a small lamp with your free hand. The wax is still warm. Your task is to deliver the document to another office before the evening audience begins, then return with a receipt. The camp has moved, but the relationships between its offices have been pitched again. You begin from the central enclosure because it is the surest reference. From there, public business lies toward the accessible side. Household routes turn behind screens, service lanes follow water and baggage, and the market gathers nearer the traffic at the edge. None of this gives you a street name. It gives you something more useful in a city that may be folded tomorrow, a sequence of functions. The lamp shows only a narrow strip of dust. A rope crosses beyond it, low enough to catch a hurried ankle. You step over, keeping the packet against your chest. A porter waits for you to clear before carrying a rolled carpet across the lane. The record clerk repeats the directions once, outward to the broad entrance, left beside the water vessels, past the carpet workers. Look for 2 office tents and choose the one with register chests outside. A city without permanent walls has still found paperwork before supper. You nod, turn from the clerk's light, and enter the first canvas lane. Behind you, another packet is already being sealed. The first lane runs between the central screens and a row of working tents. Evening business has begun before the last baggage is settled. Clerks call for ink. Attendants carry covered trays, and guards make space for officials approaching the public side. You walk quickly enough to meet the deadline, and slowly enough not to put the packet into the dust. The repeated plan helps. Even in an unfamiliar field, the central enclosure gives every direction a relation. Outward means toward public approach and traffic. Inward means toward more restricted spaces. Service movement bends along the sides rather than cutting across the center. A torchbearer passes, followed by two adults carrying a chest between them. You step against the screen until they clear. The cloth yields slightly at your shoulder, reminding you that the wall is a boundary without being masonry. At the next opening, a guard checks the lane and waves you onward. He does not need to know the packet's contents. The seal and your route place you among the ordinary messengers who keep decisions moving through the camp. The light ahead divides into 3 lamps. One belongs to an entrance mat, one to a water station, and one to a porter searching a bundle. You choose the middle glow because the clerk said the route turns beside the vessels. The evening audience has not begun. You still have time, provided the next turn is the one the plan intended. A painted marker should stand at the turn, but dust has dulled it to a dark patch on cloth. You hold the lamp closer. The color remains uncertain, and the packet waits under your arm while the city declines to become easier. Rather than guess, you read the neighboring work. To the right, water carriers are filling smaller vessels from covered jars. To the left, traders are tying cloth over goods. Straight ahead, guards face outward toward a broader opening. The combination identifies the edge you need. The public route lies beyond the waterline, not through the market. You ask one carrier to confirm. He points with his chin, both hands occupied by a jar. Follow the vessels, turn where the lane widens, and keep the audience entrance on your right. The direction is made of relationships. It would remain useful even if the painted marker vanished completely. You lower the lamp and continue. A cart has recently passed, leaving 2 ruts. They lead toward the traders, so you ignore them. The water route is narrower and cleaner, marked by damp circles where vessels rested. Behind you, the central screens disappear around a bend. For a moment, every wall looks alike. Then another row of jars appears, and the plan becomes visible again through the work people are doing. You follow the damp marks toward the widening lane, the sealed packet still warm against your palm. The outer market line is settling for the evening. Traders cover cloth, grain, vessels, and smaller goods, while customers and servants make final purchases before darkness deepens. The bazaar, meaning the market, belongs near traffic because carts, pack animals, and people can reach it without entering the central court. You keep to its inner edge. A merchant folds a length of fabric away from the dust. Another counts small weights back into a box. The market is neither a festival nor a separate town. It is one working part of the portable capital, arranged where movement can feed it. A bullock cart blocks half the lane, while 2 adults unload baskets. You wait behind the wheel. The driver sees the packet and shifts the animal forward enough to open a narrow passage. The dry line comes quietly. The cart has found a parking place more permanent than the city. You pass without touching the basket stacks. On your right, market noise spreads outward. On your left, the screened court keeps a steadier boundary. The contrast confirms that you are moving along the correct side. A boy carrying kindling starts across, sees your lamp and pauses. You let him go first because his bundle is wider than your document. Beyond him, the water vessels reappear. The clerk's directions are becoming a walkable pattern. Market at the traffic edge, water beside service movement, public audience space toward the open approach. You continue where those functions meet. A line of water vessels leads away from the market and bends behind the working tents. Carriers move along it in both directions, empty jars outward and filled ones inward. Their traffic makes the service route legible even where the canvas walls are nearly identical. You follow without joining the line itself. A full vessel requires more room than it appears to. especially when balanced against a shoulder and accompanied by an adult watching the ground rather than your packet. The route turns around a cluster of cooking equipment. Fires are controlled in an appointed area, away from loose cloth and the busiest passages. You keep the flame of your lamp covered as you pass. One carrier sets down a jar and points toward a wider opening. The public audience tent lies beyond it. Your receiving office should be farther along the outer side, near the spaces where records and decisions move. The service lane has not taken you in a straight line. It has taken you around work that should not be crossed. The longer bend preserves the work around it. A shorter route through water storage, cooking, or household screens would make everyone else's tasks longer. You step over a damp patch and wait for two empty slings to pass. The packet remains dry. Ahead, guards stand on either side of a broad entrance. You leave the water line at the place where its bend has delivered you to the next recognizable function. The apparent shortcut is a dark opening between two screens. It points almost directly toward the broad entrance. Then your lamp catches the guy rope stretched across it. The space is not a lane. It is the working gap behind a wall, filled with anchors, spare cord, and the backs of structures that face elsewhere. You stop before the rope. A less patient messenger has left one footprint beyond it, followed by a scuffed mark where the same decision was reconsidered. The proper route bends left around the screen. It adds several dozen paces and preserves a boundary that keeps public traffic from wandering through service ground. You take it. At the corner, an attendant emerges carrying folded cloth. The two of you pass without either needing to turn sideways. The lane was made for this movement. The shortcut was not. The longer path also gives you a clearer view of the central enclosure. Its outer wall remains on your right, so your direction is sound. A torch at the public entrance grows brighter with each step. You adjust the packet beneath your arm and walk on. Losing a few moments is preferable to appearing inside the wrong screen with an explanation based on geometry. The guy rope disappears behind you. Its obstruction has not delayed the city. It has protected the arrangement that allows different parts of the city to work at the same time. The royal enclosure becomes visible again at the bend, not as a complete shape, but as a long screen running across the field. Its position corrects your direction. You have drifted farther outward than you thought. You turn slightly inward while remaining on the public side. The receiving office should stand near the audience spaces, close enough for papers to move but outside the guarded household passages. A central reference is valuable because temporary streets can curve around ground, loads, and work. The plan is not a rigid drawing forced onto every hollow. It is a set of relative positions preserved while individual lines adjust to the site. You see this as you walk. The screen bows around a tree left standing. The lane widens beside a water point. A baggage stack occupies a square that would be empty on another night. Yet the broad relations remain. Center, public approach, service edge, market, ranked quarters. A guard directs a mounted messenger toward an opening ahead. You follow on foot, keeping enough distance that dust from the horse settles before you reach it. The packet now feels less like an object you might lose, and more like the reason the route matters. Offices must remain findable after every move, or decisions would travel no farther than the tent where they were written. The broad entrance is close. You check the seal with your thumb and continue along the central screen. You pass the cars, the public audience space used for court business in camp. Its wide entrance faces the accessible side, with guards at either edge and mats laid beyond the dust. The term is heard once and understood by position. People approach it. Clerks wait near it. Messengers move away carrying answers. The arrangement confirms that you have reached the correct side of the enclosure. Inside, attendants prepare lamps and place cushions. A record chest stands open near one pole. The scene belongs to administration as much as ceremony. A moving court carried procedure, registers, seals, petitions, and people trained to handle them. You do not enter. Your packet belongs to an office beyond the audience space. You keep the broad entrance on your right, as instructed, and follow the line of clerks' tents. 2 guards make room for a noble's small party. Their torches briefly flood the lane, revealing ropes, patched canvas, footprints, and the plain wooden chests that support the evening's business. The light goes with them. In the dimness afterward, you locate the first office marker by its waiting mat. The register chests are not here. You continue. The audience tent has served as a compass without ceasing to be a workplace. Its outward position tells you where public court activity meets the rest of the portable city. From the clerks' tents comes the soft industry of an office preparing for evening business. Reed pens are trimmed. Paper is stacked beneath cloth covers. A man reads a list while another searches a chest for the matching register. The moving city has carried more than shelter. It has carried habits of sequence. A packet is sealed before it leaves. A messenger remains responsible until delivery. A receiving clerk checks the mark. A register records what happened next. You walk beside these sounds, counting entrances. The second tent has 3 waiting messengers and no chests outside. The third has chests but bears the wrong office mark. Your destination lies farther on, near the turn toward the decision spaces. A clerk steps into the lane with an inked pen in hand. He nearly walks into your lamp, stops, and looks offended by the existence of darkness. You angle the light away from his papers and let him pass. The joke belongs to the inconvenience and then disappears. You return to the route. Office work makes the camp findable by sound and object. Pens, chests, runners, seals, and waiting mats distinguish one row of canvas from another. You listen for the busier register tent described by the sender. Ahead, several messengers sit beside closed chests. One rises when he sees your sealed packet. You may be nearing the correct pair of tents. The lane turns inward, but a guarded passage continues deeper toward the Emperor's household. You remain outside it. Your route follows the service connection between offices, not the private way behind the screens. A guard indicates the proper bend with 2 fingers. No challenge is needed. Your lamp, packet, and position show the kind of errand you carry, while the boundary shows where it does not authorize you to go. The service lane is narrower and busier. An attendant passes with covered vessels. 2 carpet workers carry a rolled mat between them. A porter waits with a chest until the mat clears the turn. You flatten yourself briefly against the outer screen. The packet stays between your arm and chest, protected from the passing load. Once the way opens, you continue. This arrangement allows different kinds of movement to coexist. Public visitors approach the audience side. Household members and attendants use screened routes. Clerks and messengers connect offices along controlled edges. Water and baggage take their own practical lines. The plan becomes clear through restraint. Finding your destination depends partly on knowing which route is not yours. The guarded household passage falls behind. Ahead, the service lane rejoins a broader office row. You see torchlight moving toward the evening reception and use it to confirm the direction, not as permission to follow into every space it illuminates. Torchbearers lead a small group of nobles toward the evening reception space. The procession moves along the public lane, then turns beside the audience entrance. For a few moments, the lights form a bright moving arrow through the camp. You follow at a distance. Their route overlaps with yours until the office row. The torches reveal the hierarchy of movement without requiring a map. Guards face the approaching party. Attendants draw aside. Messengers keep to the edge. Baggage carriers wait until the group has passed. The lane's use declares its function. At the office turn, the nobles continue toward reception, while the messengers peel away. You take the messenger's branch. The bright procession makes the lane briefly easier to read, but for you it is simply a temporary compass. The last torch turns behind a screen. Darkness returns with surprising speed. Your small lamp again becomes the only light directly useful to your feet. 2 office tents stand ahead. They match the clerk's description in shape, but not yet in detail. A stack of baggage partly blocks one entrance. You keep walking toward them, holding the route in memory. Central enclosure, market edge, water line, public audience space, then the office branch. A tall stack of baggage hides the torch line and half the office row. Rolled carpets, covered chests and poles have been set down while their destination is decided. The pile creates a temporary wall in a city already made of temporary walls. You stop rather than invent a passage. To the left, a narrow gap runs between the baggage and a screen. It may rejoin the lane, or it may end among anchors. To the right, two porters are moving the upper rolls. You wait for them to expose the proper route. The pause protects more than your clothing. A messenger squeezing through the wrong gap could disturb private ground, trip a rope, or force workers to move loads twice. One porter recognizes your uncertainty. He tells you the office lane bends around the right side. The left gap belongs to the rear of a store tent. You thank him and step aside while a chest comes down. The newly opened path reveals a row of waiting mats and the edge of a register box. The baggage stack has delayed you, but it has also shown how the plan adapts during use. Objects occupy space before they reach final positions. Adults keep the city legible by explaining temporary changes and preserving the main routes around them. You pass the last roll. The two nearly identical office tents now stand fully in view. The receiving clerk must be in one of them. A carpet worker kneels beside the lane, repairing a frayed edge before the mat goes indoors. You ask him which tent handles the register named on your packet. He does not point into the distance. He gives you neighbors. Take the tent after the chest with brass corners. Do not choose the entrance with 3 ink pots, because that office copies orders. Look for the waiting messengers seated beside folded saddlecloths. The instruction could only work in this camp. It ties the destination to the objects and people around it. You repeat the sequence: brass-cornered chest, copying office, waiting messengers, folded saddlecloths. The carpet worker nods and returns to his needle. The first chest appears near the next opening. Beyond it, 3 ink pots stand on a low board. You continue past. At the following tent, 2 messengers sit beside a neat pile of folded cloth used on riding animals. The route has resolved into a specific entrance. You pause before crossing. A rope runs from the tent corner to a peg beyond the mat, leaving a clear central approach. You take the opening rather than stepping over the line. Inside, a clerk is speaking to another runner. You wait at the edge with the seal visible. The carpet worker's directions have carried you farther than any command to go north or east. In a repeated layout, function and neighborhood are the most durable signs. Before the clerk is free, you stand beside a screened household route running behind the office row. Women of the imperial household, female attendants, children, guards, servants, and baggage all required movement through the traveling residents. The screen protects that inhabited route from casual crossing. You hear footsteps and low conversation beyond it. Nothing in the sound invites speculation. People are carrying out evening tasks on the other side of a cloth boundary. A European visitor might have described the screen mainly as concealment. From within the camp's logistics, it is also guidance. It tells you where not to walk, keeps an office approach clear, and allows household movement without routing everyone through public traffic. An attendant emerges at the guarded opening with a covered basket. The guard makes space. She turns along the service lane and passes you without interruption. The receiving clerk is still occupied. You move your lamp away from the screen so it does not shine through the cloth. The gesture is small and sufficient. When the earlier runner leaves, the clerk looks toward your seal. You step forward. The household passage continues behind you, neither empty nor decorative. It has done its work by keeping separate movements possible within the same field. Your delivery has reached the correct neighborhood without trespassing into a different one. The first office tent contains clerks, papers, and chests, but so does the second. From the lane they are nearly identical, You need the one that receives the particular register named on the seal. You read the arrangement. At the first entrance, 3 low mats hold petitioners waiting to speak. Inside, a clerk copies from one sheet to another. The chests are small and frequently opened. At the second, messengers wait with folded receipts. 2 larger register chests stand under a cloth cover. A narrow board beside them holds seals and string. The difference is not painted on the roof. It appears in the work. You choose the second entrance. The waiting runner shifts to make room. You keep outside the mat until the clerk raises his hand. A cart passes behind you, and dust enters the lane. You turn your shoulder so the packet remains protected. The seal is intact. The clerk finishes checking another document, closes the register, and looks up. You state the sending office and hold out the packet without releasing it. He asks for the register name. Your answer matches the mark on the seal. Only then does he reach across the board. The correct office has been found through mats, chests, waiting people, and procedure, all parts of a layout that can be raised again on different ground. The receiving clerk points to the register chests before taking the packet. Their position near the audience and decision spaces allows documents to move quickly between discussion, record, and dispatch. You notice the practical arrangement because it has guided your feet. Chests that hold active registers stand near the entrance. Older volumes sit farther inside. Seals and fresh string remain on the board. Waiting messengers occupy the side that does not block clerks carrying papers. The office is a room of cloth, but its workflow has been pitched as carefully as its walls. A second clerk lifts the cover from the correct chest. The first checks your packet against a list of expected deliveries. He reads the sending mark, examines the wax, and compares the string. You maintain your grip. Custody does not change because the destination looks right. Outside, torchlight crosses the screen and briefly outlines the pole above the register board. The entire office could be folded into baggage, yet the record inside may concern decisions extending far beyond this field. The clerk finds the matching entry on his list. He places one finger beside it and reaches for the packet again. You are at the right tent. The route through the city has done its work. What remains is the formal moment when the sealed document passes from one responsible adult to another. You present the sealed packet across the low board. The receiving clerk takes it with both hands, turns the wax toward the lamp, and checks for a break. The seal is sound. He names the sending office. You confirm it. He names the register. You confirm that as well. Only then does he cut the string and place the packet beside the open chest. Your responsibility ends at a clear point rather than dissolving because another person has touched the paper. The clerk marks his list. A second clerk places the expected register beside him. The larger point is secure. The itinerant court carried records, officials, and administrative routines with it. You wait for the receipt. The clerk reads the first lines, identifies the register needed, and sends an assistant to the inner chest. While they work, another messenger arrives and takes the place you occupied at the board. You step aside, keeping your lamp low. The room has absorbed the packet without confusion. Its position near the public business spaces and its relation to neighboring offices allowed the document to arrive before the evening audience. The wax that warmed your palm is now broken beside the correct register. You watch the clerk prepare a narrow receipt strip for the journey back. The clerk searches the open register while you wait. His finger moves down a column, stops, returns to the packet, and finds the name that links them. The match completes more than your errand. It reveals the camp's plan through the route you have walked. You began at the central enclosure, followed service movement beside water, used the market as an outer boundary, corrected direction by the public audience space, respected household screens, and read office function through chests, mats, and waiting messengers. Each relation answered the next uncertainty. The clerk makes a notation and folds the receipt strip. He presses a smaller mark into wax at one end, enough to show that the packet reached this office. A runner beside you shifts his knees and asks whether the water lane is still open. You tell him about the baggage stack and the clearer route around its right side. The knowledge has already become useful to someone else. The receipt cools quickly. The clerk hands it over and returns to the register. Your historical question now has an answer. How could anyone find anything after a capital moved onto unfamiliar ground? Not by recognizing permanent buildings, but by recognizing a repeated order of functions, guarded routes, central references, and human activity. You place the strip inside your sleeve, lift the lamp, and turn toward the entrance. The return walk begins with fewer questions. You know which side of the office mat is clear, where the household route remains screened, and which baggage stack must be passed on the right. The city has not changed into stone during your visit. Your memory has changed. At the copying office, 3 ink pots still stand on the board. The brass-cornered chest marks the next turn. The carpet worker has finished his repair and is rolling the mat with the frayed edge inside. You show him the receipt. He nods as though the outcome was never in doubt, which is generous to both of you. The torch procession has ended, so you use quieter signs. Voices from the clerk's tents fade behind. The broad audience entrance appears ahead. Water carriers cross the service lane with their final full vessels. You no longer follow each clue separately. They join into a route. At the audience space, a guard directs another messenger outward. You pass on the inner side, avoiding the approach traffic. The central screen reappears beyond the lamps. A city assembled for a halt has become familiar through one completed errand. Its plan is not abstract now. It is the reason the receipt in your sleeve can return to the desk where the journey began. You adjust the lamp against a small breath of wind and continue toward the water turn. Evening has settled more fully over the camp. Lamps now mark entrances that were dim on the outward walk, and the same obstacles have become ordinary landmarks. The guy rope at the false shortcut remains across the gap. You turn before reaching it. The waterline is quieter. Covered jars stand in rows while empty slings hang from a pole. You step around the damp circles without needing a carrier's direction. At the market edge, traders have finished covering most goods. The bullock cart has moved, leaving an open lane and 2 deep ruts. You cross after a porter carrying the last basket. The central enclosure stays on your left. Its long screen guides the final part of the route. Behind it, household voices and office work have softened into separate bands of sound. You pass the place where the painted marker was hidden by dust. It remains unreadable. This no longer matters. Market, water, public approach, and center have given you stronger references. The clerk's lamp appears at the end of the lane. Another messenger is taking instructions beside it. You slow as you approach, not from uncertainty, but to keep the receipt free of dust. The return journey has required fewer pauses and no improvised crossings. A field that was strange at the start of the errand now holds a sequence your feet can follow. You reach the sending office and wait for the clerk to look up. You reach the clerk who sent you and place the receipt beside his lamp. He checks the mark, folds the strip once, and sets it with the outgoing papers. Nothing in the exchange looks remarkable. That is precisely why the journey matters. A sealed packet has crossed an unfamiliar field, past market traffic, public audience space, service lanes, household screens, register chests, and 2 nearly identical office tents, then reached the correct hands without anyone needing a permanent street. The route has become shorter in memory. You can picture it by relationships. Outward from the central enclosure, past the broad entrance, around the waterline, beside the carpet workers, then toward the chests where messengers wait. The city did not need stone corners to be legible. It needed repeated positions, guarded passages, recognizable duties, and adults who understood how one function stood beside another. Outside, evening has softened the dust. Lamps now occupy the turns that were uncertain on the outward walk. A trader finishes covering a bale. A water carrier sets down the last vessel in a row. Behind a screen, household voices settle into their own work. The plan has done more than arrange tents neatly. It has allowed ordinary business to find its destination after the ground changed beneath it. The clerk reaches for the next paper. Your errand is complete, and the moving city has given you a route home. You watch an animal handler kneel beside 2 camels and a bullock cart before departure. His world is smaller than the imperial column. 2 sets of girths, 1 yoke, 4 animals, a wooden wheel, water, fodder, and the loads assigned to this group. He presses a palm beneath the first camel's strap. The rolled screens above it are balanced, but the lower rope sits too close to a rubbed patch. He loosens the knot and threads a folded pad beneath. What an animal can lift is not the same as what it can carry all day. A load must remain balanced through uneven ground, stops, heat, and the changing pressure of movement. The handler judges by stance, breathing, skin, and the way the animal settles after weight is taken. One camel regards the timetable as an interesting rumor. It turns its head toward a fodder basket and refuses to improve the angle. The handler waits, then guides the head forward without striking. When the animal stands square, he checks the opposite side. Nearby, the bullock cart carries heavier crosspieces and repair tools. Its load spreads through wheels rather than a saddle, but it brings other limits: axle, rim, road surface, and the strength of the pair beneath the yoke. The great camp moves through thousands of such local judgments. This group will leave only when all 4 animals and the cart can finish together. The handler divides rolled screens and poles between the camels. He begins by lifting each piece long enough to feel its awkwardness, not merely its weight. A compact roll sits well against the saddle. A long pole can project, strike another load, or shift when the animal turns. He pairs lengths on opposite sides and binds their ends so they move together. The first camel receives 2 screen rolls and lighter poles. The second takes a denser cloth bundle with matching weight on the far side. After each addition, the handler steps back and studies the line of the saddle. One side hangs lower. He moves a coil of rope across, then asks the camel to rise. The animal stands in stages, rear legs first, and the load settles. The imbalance remains, though smaller. He lowers the camel again and shifts one short pole. This time the saddle comes level. The adjustment costs several minutes at the halt. On the road it may prevent hours of rubbing, stopping and repacking. Balance is therefore not neatness. It is endurance arranged before departure. A porter ties the loose ends above the load rather than beneath the belly, where they could work free unseen. The handler runs both hands along the girth. The 2 camels now carry different objects but comparable strain. Their work has been planned for distance, not for the satisfying appearance of a perfectly full saddle. One heavy crosspiece has been added to the left side of the second camel. The animal rises, shifts its feet, and leans away from the burden. The handler removes the piece. A spectacular load is of no use if it cannot be carried to the next halt. He places the crosspiece on the bullock cart, where its weight can lie between the wheels and be shared through the frame. The cart is already loaded with tent poles, peg baskets and repair tools. The new timber fits along one side, but its end would extend beyond the wheel. 2 workers turn it diagonally and tie it against a shorter bundle. The arrangement leaves space for the wheel to move and for the driver to reach the pin. Access matters because a repairable problem must remain reachable after loading. The camel settles when the extra weight is gone. The handler checks the rubbed patch beneath the strap and finds no new pressure. This is the gentlest arithmetic of the march. Not the largest total, but which carrier should take which shape for how long. Elephants, camels, bullocks, carts and human porters could complement one another because their capacities were different. The crosspiece is secure, the camel stands square. The handler marks the altered load in memory and moves to the bullocks beneath the yoke. The bullocks stand quietly while the handler lifts the yoke pad from the nearer shoulder. The cloth beneath is worn thin at one edge and has begun to gather into a hard fold. He replaces it before the fold becomes a sore. A fresh pad comes from the cart's repair bundle. He spreads it flat, checks that no grit lies underneath. then lowers the wooden yoke with another adult taking the opposite end. The bullock shifts once. The handler places 2 fingers beneath the pad and follows the pressure from neck to shoulder. There is room for movement without looseness. Travel accounts describe carts delayed by weak cattle, bad ground, broken equipment, and overloaded roads. Those records do not let us reconstruct every animal's day, but they make the constraint plain. The camp moved only as reliably as its carriers and vehicles. The handler returns to the present shoulder. He asks the bullock to step forward and back. The pad stays flat. The second animal receives the same inspection. Its padding is sound, though one tie has frayed. A short length of new cord replaces it. Nothing about the work is ceremonious. It is material acknowledgement that the animals will provide force through the next stage. The yoke may look unchanged when the handler finishes, but the pressure beneath it has been made bearable before the cart begins to roll. Nearby, an elephant crew secures a bulkier tent bundle. The load is broad, suited to the animal's size, and lifted with ropes under the direction of several adults. The camel handler watches without treating the elephant as a universal solution. The large animal can carry objects awkward for a camel, yet it also requires feed, water, trained keepers, suitable ground, and a place in the order of movement. Each carrier answers a different problem. Camels bear balanced side loads and travel with their own gait. Bullocks draw wheeled weight. Elephants handle particular heavy or bulky equipment. Porters take loads through spaces where wheels and large animals cannot pass. The elephant shifts as the bundle settles. Its crew pauses, lowers one corner, and reties the outer rope. The adjustment resembles the handler's work on the camel, only at another scale. He turns back to his own group. The cart's diagonal crosspiece remains within the wheel line. Both camel saddles sit level. The bullock pads lie smooth beneath the yoke. The moving camp is often described through totals, but totals hide compatibility. 10 loads cannot be assigned to any 10 animals without regard to shape, road, duration, or condition. The elephant crew leads its animal away. The handler gives the first camel a final touch at the shoulder and begins guiding his smaller train toward water. The handler leads the animals toward water before the departure lane fills. The camels follow in a loose line. The bullock cart comes behind, its wheels turning slowly enough that the driver can hear each wooden complaint. Early watering reduces later delay, but it also means reaching the trough before dozens of other groups crowd the approach. The lane narrows beside stacked poles. A porter moves one bundle aside, and the cart passes with inches to spare. The handler keeps the camels from turning toward feed baskets set along the wall. At the water point, attendants direct large animals to one side and smaller carriers to another. The handler waits for a clear place rather than pushing into the line. The first camel drinks after a brief inspection of the vessel. The second lowers its head more readily. The bullocks remain yoked, but are allowed to stand with the cart straight, avoiding a twist through their shoulders. Water consumed now does not need to be carried in the same way. Yet water for the road and next halt still occupies vessels and load space. Supply is never weightless merely because it will disappear. The handler watches each animal finish. He does not pull them away at the first pause. When all 4 have lifted their heads, he turns the group toward the fodder area and the waiting road. The trough line is longer than expected. Another transport group arrived from a delayed section, and several animals stand between your handler and the open lane. He keeps the camels in place without allowing them to crowd the bullocks. The first camel tries to step sideways toward a dripping vessel. A light pull on the lead rope and a hand at the shoulder return it to line. The bullocks begin to twist beneath the yoke. The cart cannot follow that angle safely. The driver rolls it forward half a wheel, straightening the pair before stopping again. Waiting becomes an active task when animals, loads and wheels share narrow ground. Space must be preserved. Straps must remain clear. An impatient movement by one carrier can press several others into ropes or vessels. The handler checks the camel pad while the line advances. The rubbed patch remains protected. He also touches the cart hub, feeling no unusual warmth. At last, the group ahead moves away. The handler guides his camels through first, then signals the cart. The bullocks take the turn without twisting. The delay has not improved the timetable, but it has not damaged the group either. Once the lane opens, all 4 animals and the cart leave together, ready for the slower work of the road rather than already tired from confusion at the trough. Fodder is measured by the animals in front of the handler, not by an impressive number for the whole camp. He looks at condition, expected distance, and what can be obtained at the next halt. Grass and grain take up carrying capacity, even though they are consumed along the way. A moving establishment must transport some of the means that transport it. The handler fills 2 feed bags for the camels and sets aside a smaller portion for use during the stage. The bullocks receive their share near the cart, where loose fodder can be gathered rather than trampled into the lane. One animal eats quickly, the other pauses between mouthfuls. He does not force them into the same rhythm. A store worker records the amount issued to this group according to the practice of the establishment. The exact systems changed across time and place, but organized supply was unavoidable. Animals cannot draw carts on admiration. The handler ties the reserve feed high enough to remain dry and clear of the animals before departure. He checks the knot from both sides and leaves the bag where its weight will not disturb the saddle. The remaining fodder is divided between the cart and the camel loads. The handler preserves enough capacity for water and repair pieces. Feeding the carriers is not extra baggage. It is part of the road placed inside the load. One more pole bundle waits beside the loading mat. It could fit on the cart if the reserve fodder were reduced. The handler leaves the poles for another group and keeps the feed. The decision appears modest beside the scale of the camp, yet it expresses the real limit of movement. Equipment matters only if the animals carrying it can continue. Fodder supports not one dramatic lift, but the entire distance between halts. A supervisor confirms that the spare poles can travel on a later cart. Their arrival is less urgent than the screens already loaded. The handler reties the feed bag and checks that it does not press against the wheel. The group is now slightly less full and more likely to finish. The small group shows the constraint without any grand total. 2 camels, 2 bullocks, and 1 cart must carry feed, water, equipment, and repair pieces within the limits of the bodies and wheels available. The handler walks around them once. Feed is secure. Water vessels are stoppered. The wheel pin can be reached. Straps lie flat. The cart pole bundle will not shift into the animal's legs. A departure call passes down the lane. He takes the lead rope, waits for the bullocks to lean into the yoke, and lets the small train join the road. The road begins with a stony section beyond the camp. Camel feet pick their way between rough patches. The bullock cart follows, its wooden wheels striking irregularly against the ground. A new sound enters the rhythm, a sharp click from the right wheel. The handler raises his hand. The driver slows before the wheel pin can work loose. Faster groups pass on the outer side, leaving dust over the stopped cart. He kneels beside the hub. The pin has shifted outward by less than a finger's length. Repeated jolts would continue the movement until the wheel became unsafe. The load remains tied. Because the repair pieces were left accessible, the driver reaches the pin without unloading the cart. He taps it inward with a small hammer and adds a retaining wedge. The bullocks stand under the yoke, breathing harder than they did at the halt. The pause gives them relief while the repair is made. The handler checks the opposite wheel and finds its pin secure. He runs a hand along the diagonal crosspiece, which has not shifted. A road does not need to be impassable to govern movement. Small stones, ruts and slopes accumulate through wheels, shoulders, straps and feet. The handler listens to those consequences before they become failures. The repaired wheel turns once by hand without complaint. He rises, clears the hammer, and signals the driver to move at a slower pace. After a short distance, the group stops again in a patch of shade. The wheel is holding, but the bullocks need a longer breath before the next rise. The handler loosens the yoke tie slightly without removing the load. One bullock lowers its head. The other stands with legs spread, recovering balance. A brief halt protects the chance of completing the stage. The road offers no prize for arriving first with an animal too strained to work tomorrow. He gives each bullock a small amount of water, enough for the pause without emptying the reserve. The camels stand nearby with their loads still level. One chews slowly, indifferent to the cart's passing. The handler checks the repaired pin. It remains seated. Dust has gathered around the wedge, but no fresh mark shows movement. Porters overtake the cart carrying smaller bundles. An elephant group moves along firmer ground farther from the rut. Different parts of the advance establishment spread according to what the road allows. When the bullock's breathing steadies, the handler draws the yoke tie firm again. He waits until both animals place their feet beneath them. The cart starts without a jerk. The wheels regain their slower rhythm. The stop has cost time and preserved the group. On a repeated road, preservation is the more useful result. The camels could walk faster than the bullock cart. The handler does not let them set the pace. He leads them close enough that the driver can call without raising his voice. The cart becomes the measure for this small group, because screens arriving without their crosspieces would not complete the section. The road levels. Camel steps lengthen, then shorten when the lead rope checks them. The bullocks settle into an even pull. Wheels turn with the repaired click gone. Moving at the slowest carrier's sustainable speed creates a different kind of order from the camp plan, but the logic is related. Parts must arrive in useful relation. Speed separated from function is not success. A fork appears where one track crosses firmer ground and the other shortens the distance through soft soil. The handler chooses the longer firm track for the cart. The camels follow, though they could manage the direct line. The decision keeps the group together and protects the wheel repair. Dust is lighter here. The cart rolls without sinking. Ahead, faster animals have become small shapes near the next rise. The handler lets them go. Their loads may be needed first, or they may simply be easier to move. His responsibility remains with 4 animals and 1 vehicle. He walks beside the lead camel, at the pace the bullocks can carry through the whole stage. The firm track ends at a broad patch of softer ground. Recent wheels have cut shallow ruts, and the cart sinks until the rims press dark lines into the soil. The bullocks pull. The cart moves a little, then stops. The handler unloads part of the weight before asking them to strain again. 2 screen rolls come off the cart and are tied temporarily across the camel loads. The added weight is moderate and balanced on both sides. Porters lift a peg basket and carry it beyond the soft patch. The diagonal crosspiece remains on the cart because moving its awkward length among the animals would create another problem. With the load reduced, the bullocks lean forward. The wheels rise through the first rut. Adults walk beside them, ready to push at the frame but careful to stay clear of the turning rims. The cart reaches firmer earth. Everyone stops. The screen rolls come off the camels and return to their original place. The peg basket is lifted onto the cart. Temporary redistribution has changed the load for a few dozen paces, not the whole journey. The handler checks the camel girths and the bullock's shoulders. No strap has folded, no pad has shifted. Soft ground has been crossed through cooperation between animal carrying, wheeled transport, and human lifting. None replaces the others. Together they close the gap that one method alone could not manage. Beyond the soft patch, workers are improving the approach with spades and axes. They cut back a raised edge, fill the deepest wheel marks, and clear branches that would strike high loads. Road work and camp work belong to the same movement. A beautifully raised enclosure is useless if the equipment cannot reach it. The handler slows while a worker levels the near rut. The cart passes only after the spade is clear. Its repaired wheel takes the filled ground without a jolt. Some pioneers and laborers traveled ahead to prepare routes, crossings, water access, and campsites. Written lists can make them sound like departments. Here they are, adults shifting earth so another set of adults and animals can continue. The handler points out the rut where his cart sank. 2 workers carry firmer soil toward it for the next vehicle. Information moves backward along the road as well as forward. A cut branch lies beside the track. The handler checks that its broken end cannot catch the camel load. He turns it farther away with his foot. The road ahead is still imperfect. It is merely more usable than it was. The small train proceeds through the cleared section. Behind it, spades return to work. The next cart may cross with less unloading because this one revealed where the ground failed. The moving city advances through repairs made for people not yet in sight. At a narrow rise, porters leave the wheel track and take a direct footpath. They carry bundles on heads, shoulders, and carrying cloths, choosing ground too tight for the cart and awkward for large animals. Human carrying fills gaps in the transport system. It does not make animal logistics disappear. The loads on these porters are selected because they can be handled over the short path and received at the top. The handler sends 1 small rope bundle with them. It will be needed early at the halt and weighs little enough not to disrupt their balance. He keeps the heavier screens with the animals. A porter tests his footing before climbing. Another waits below rather than crowding the narrow section. At the top, adults take the bundles and stack them clear of the path. The cart follows the longer curve. Its wheels remain on ground broad enough for the bullocks to turn. For a few minutes, the porters move ahead and disappear behind the rise. They rejoin the road where the curve ends. The rope bundle continues toward the advance crews, while the porters return for another assigned load. The handler watches them go, then checks his own group. Transport is not a contest between bodies and animals. It is an arrangement of capacities, each used where it fits. The bullocks resume their even pull. The camels follow. The next halt is now close enough for lanterns to be seen through the dust. The faster groups have already reached the halt when the cart arrives. Some screen lines stand. Poles lie sorted near the measured ground. Water carriers are directing animals away from the working lanes. The handler does not drive straight toward the unloading mats. He leads his animals first to the supply side. The small group has completed the stage without abandoning the cart, injuring a shoulder, or losing the awkward crosspiece. Arrival is therefore more than crossing an invisible line. It is reaching the place in condition to unload and move again. A receiving worker checks the load order. The early rope bundle has arrived by porter. The screens on the camels are needed next, but the handler asks for water and feed before unloading everything. The worker agrees and marks the cart's position. The camels kneel. Their loads remain tied while they rest. The bullocks stop on level ground, still yoked until the cart is blocked against movement. The handler touches the repaired wheel. The wedge remains firm. He looks back along the road, now hidden by evening dust. The group arrived after riders and lighter carriers, but it brought the pieces assigned to it. No faster arrival would have improved the camp if the cart had failed in soft ground. Water reaches the animals. The handler waits beside them, allowing the stage to end before the next task begins. After the animals drink, the handler loosens the camel girths. Pressure lifts from the padded places. He checks each patch of skin before the loads are removed. The first saddle has left no fresh rub. The second shows a warm area beneath one strap, so he marks the position and asks that the next load be tied differently. The bullocks are unyoked only after the cart wheels are blocked. 2 adults lift the wooden bar while the handler draws the animals forward. Their shoulders emerge from beneath the pads. He removes the fresh pad placed before departure. It is damp but flat. The old worn cloth remains in the repair bundle, not returned to use. Material acknowledgement comes before his own rest. Animals receive water, fodder, loosened straps, and inspection because their work has had physical consequences. The first screen rolls are carried from the camels toward the tent crews. The diagonal crosspiece leaves the cart with 4 adults taking its length. Each object enters the next sequence. The handler keeps the repair tools aboard until the wheel is checked in daylight. He coils the lead ropes and places them beside the feed. The camels fold their legs and settle. The bullocks stand free of the yoke. Only now does the handler sit on the cart shaft. His task has narrowed from movement to watching the animals recover, which is still part of bringing the camp safely forward. The handler sits near the cart while chewing and breathing settle into a steady rhythm. The camels have their girths loosened. The bullocks stand free of the yoke, close enough to the cart that its familiar smell remains beside them. Under a low lantern, fodder stems shift and disappear at the measured pace of animals no longer being asked to pull. The group arrived after the faster riders and lighter loads, but it arrived together. No pole was worth leaving a bullock sore. No early appearance was worth abandoning a wheel in soft ground. Water, feed, sound harness, and a repairable cart were not interruptions to movement. They were the conditions that made another day's movement possible. Nearby, another handler folds a pad that will be dried before morning. A porter sets down an empty carrying cloth. The wheel pin, tightened on the road, gives no further complaint. These are modest endings, each one tied to a body that has completed its share of the stage. The handler rests one hand on the cart shaft and does not call the animals onward. Ahead, parts of the camp are already standing. Behind, the road lies quiet where the wheels passed. Here, the last work is to let muscle cool, let mouths work through feed, and leave the loads untouched until the carriers have had enough. The lantern remains low. The animals breathe. The small transport group is finished for the night. You remain with an adult attendant inside a family tent after the evening meal. She lowers the household lamp until its flame sits below the rim, bright enough for work and less likely to reach the cloth above. Portable court life included domestic rooms, bedding, vessels, screens and attendants, as well as public ceremony. The room makes that plain. A folded serving cloth lies beside covered bowls. Sleeping mats wait near the far wall. Packing cords hang from a pole where they can be found before departure. Canvas receives the sounds of neighboring households and passes some onward. A vessel touches another with a small ring. Footsteps move along the screened passage outside. The attendant clears the center of the floor. She places one bowl near the entrance for removal and another beside the covered water vessel. Nothing is arranged for display. Each object is put where a hand can reach it without crossing bedding in darkness. She checks the distance between lamp and cloth, then moves the stand a little farther from the wall. The room becomes safer by half a pace. Beyond the screen, the watch lantern passes. Its light shows the seam for a moment and is gone. The attendant folds the last corner of the serving cloth. Her ordinary goal is nearly complete. Leave the room usable through the night and simple to pack when the moving city becomes baggage again. The unused serving cloth is folded into a compact square. The attendant presses out crumbs, turns the clean side inward, and places it beside the vessels meant for the morning. Order at night shortens confusion later. A cloth that is folded now need not be shaken beside sleeping people. A bowl near the exit can leave without crossing the bedding. Packing cords kept together will not have to be searched for while poles are coming down. She covers the water vessel and sets a cup beside it. The cup's handle faces outward, a small courtesy to a hand reaching in low light. At the entrance, one sandal has been left across the clear path. She moves it to the wall and checks the mat beneath for a raised edge. The floor is now open from bedding to screen. Outside, cooking equipment is being gathered. The sounds arrive softened by canvas. A lid placed down, a low instruction, footsteps moving away. The attendant looks around the room from the lamp's narrow circle. Nothing needs to be permanent. It needs only to be ready for the remaining hours. She lowers the wick once more. The folded cloth, Covered vessels, cords, and clear entrance remain visible. The work has become smaller, and that is its own progress. Voices from the neighboring tent pass clearly through canvas. One adult asks where a vessel was placed. Another answers from close enough to sound inside this room. The attendant lowers her own voice and continues. Cloth walls provide enclosure without the silence of masonry. Households hear movement in adjoining rooms, footsteps along lanes, animals beyond screens, and the watch making its rounds. Privacy depends on routes, custom, guarded openings, and considerate behavior as much as on thickness. She lifts the bedding roll and carries it toward the quieter side of the tent. The canvas there borders another household rather than a service lane. Voices continue, but carts and water carriers will be farther away. A child in the neighboring room laughs once, then is hushed. The attendant pauses until the sound settles, not because it is alarming, but because the next vessel in her hands could knock against the lampstand. She places the vessel without noise. The room receives the neighboring murmur and lets it fade. At the entrance, a guard speaks briefly to someone passing outside. Footsteps turn away. The attendant smooths the bedding mat with both palms. Canvas cannot make every life separate, but the arranged camp gives each household a protected place within shared sound. She leaves the lamp low and the inner path open. The attendant checks the outer screen where the household passage meets the lane. She lifts a hooded lantern and steps only as far as the guarded opening. The screen is tied firmly to its pole. The lower edge leaves no gap large enough for a foot to enter by mistake. The passage beyond remains clear for attendants, household members, guards, and service workers. The secure point is practical. Women travelled with the court, and their lives required protected routes, rooms, baggage, water, food, attendants, and ordinary movement. The attendant returns immediately to the tie. One loop has twisted. She straightens it so the strain lies across the cord rather than one narrow bend. The guard approaches along the lane. He checks the public side of the screen, while she checks the inner side. Their tasks meet at the same cloth boundary without becoming the same duty. The lantern shows dust gathered at the pole. She brushes it away from the knot and tests the pull. The passage remains inhabited space, neither empty nor offered for inspection. Its practical arrangement allows the household to settle while other parts of the camp continue working. Satisfied, the attendant lowers the lantern hood and goes back inside. She spreads the bedding away from the entrance draft and farther still from the lamp. The first mat lies lengthwise against the inner wall. A second overlaps it enough to cover the uneven ground beneath. One corner rises over a shallow clod. The attendant lifts the mat, breaks the earth with the side of her hand, and lays the covering down again. The floor becomes level by the scale that matters to a resting body. A folded cover goes at the foot. A small cloth bundle is placed near the wall, leaving the central path clear. The room has been made usable through placement rather than permanence. Canvas above, carpet below, and screens at the side create a domestic interior for this halt. Tomorrow, the same materials may become rolls and loads. The attendant checks the lamp's position from the bedding. Its light reaches the entrance and water vessel without standing close to the cloth. She turns the wick slightly lower. Outside, a camel breathes beyond the screen. The sound enters and recedes. She presses the last lifted edge of the mat flat. No further adjustment is needed. Bedding, lamp, vessels, and entrance now form a narrow, familiar circle. The day's movement has ended here in the ordinary work of preparing a place to lie down. The cooking fire outside has been reduced to a small bed of coals. The attendant carries one covered ember to the appointed banked place near the household service area. She uses a shallow vessel and keeps the lantern behind her. The ember gives enough light to show its own red edge beneath ash. Fires in a tented city require controlled locations and adults who know whether heat has been covered, moved, or left under watch. The goal is not a dramatic extinction, It is a safe, known remainder for later use. At the banked place, another attendant has prepared ash and a low surround. Together they settle the ember, cover it, and leave a narrow opening for air. No loose cloth hangs nearby. The first attendant waits. The glow remains contained. A watchkeeper passing the lane sees where it has been placed and receives a quiet acknowledgement. She carries the empty vessel back toward the tent. Its metal is warm through the cloth wrapped around the handle. Inside, the household lamp appears brighter after the dark lane. She sets the vessel near the exit for morning removal and checks that no spark has followed. The banked glow remains outside under watch. The room keeps only the covered lamp. One source of light has been reduced, placed, and accounted for. The attendant turns to the next familiar task. A wall panel moves as the night air changes. The motion is slight, a slow inward breath followed by release. But it is different from the earlier stillness. The attendant watches the seam, the upper tie holds. The lower edge lifts enough to show a thin line of dark ground. She does not immediately go outside. The watch lantern is approaching along the lane, and opening the screen into its path would create more confusion than the loose loop. The panel moves again. Bedding remains far enough away that the cloth touches nothing inside. When the watchkeeper reaches the entrance, the attendant speaks through the covered opening. He pauses on the public side while she steps out on the household side. Together they locate the slack lower cord. Cooler air has eased the rope and changed the angle at the peg. The attendant draws the loop firm, then dresses the knot so its turns lie flat. The watchkeeper tests the outer line. It holds with less strain. She returns inside before the lantern moves on. The panel settles into a smaller motion. Canvas still responds to the air. It no longer lifts at the ground. The room has not become silent or rigid. It has become sound enough for the attendant to leave the wall and lower the household lamp again. The attendant steps into the lane with the hooded lantern for one brief circuit. Night order depends on a small number of adults remaining awake while most rooms settle. She keeps close to the household screen. The lantern's hood directs light toward the ground, showing pegs, ropes, and the clear edge of the passage without shining broadly into tents. A watchkeeper moves ahead at an unhurried pace. At each turn he looks along the lane, checks a guarded opening, and listens before continuing. The attendant sees the banked cooking glow beneath ash. It remains low. The water vessels are covered. No bundle has fallen into the passage. Beyond the outer screen, an animal shifts and a tether ring sounds once. The keeper pauses. The animal settles without another movement. Nothing in the circuit becomes a threat or spectacle. Its purpose is ordinary continuity. Identify a loose line, an uncovered ember, a blocked root, or a sound that does not settle. At the far corner, the attendant turns back. The same pegs appear in reverse order. Her lantern touches each briefly, then leaves it dark. She reaches the household entrance and lowers the hood. The room inside has remained as she placed it, with bedding clear and the lamp waiting at its reduced flame. At the nearest outer corner, the attendant tests the guy rope once more. Cooler air has changed the pull. The line is firm, but a loose loop near the peg has twisted against itself. She kneels and opens the loop without releasing the main tension. The cord is drawn through, laid flat, and tightened in a smaller turn. A dressed knot shares pressure across the rope instead of pinching one strand. The difference can be felt beneath the fingers even when it is hard to see. The watchkeeper holds the lantern where it lights the peg but not the tent interior. He waits without offering an unnecessary instruction. The attendant pulls the line. The pole answers with a steadier resistance. The screen edge no longer moves at the lower corner. She tucks the spare end upward so it will not lie in the lane. A passing foot now has clear ground. The task is small enough to vanish from memory by morning. That is not a reason to leave it undone. Ordinary rest in canvas depends on many such corrections being completed before they become shared inconveniences. The attendant rises and brushes soil from her fingers. The keeper continues along the lane. She returns to the entrance, carrying the hooded lantern low, while the reset rope keeps its quiet line behind her. The passing watchkeeper pauses at the household entrance. He reports that the outer lane is clear and the banked fires have been checked. The attendant tells him about the retied corner and the animal sound beyond the screen. Their exchange is quiet and short. Each gives the other information needed for the next circuit. The night watch does not replace household care. The attendant knows which vessel, lamp, screen, or movement belongs to this room. The keeper sees the larger lane, guarded openings, fire points, and animal lines. Their attention overlaps at the boundary. He adjusts the hood of his lantern before moving away. Light narrows across the ground and leaves the upper canvas dark. The attendant waits until his footsteps pass the next turn. No other person approaches. The household passage remains open and protected. Inside, the covered lamp has burned steadily. She checks the wick and finds no soot gathering at the rim. The ordinary business of sleeping in a moving city depends on people whose wakefulness is divided rather than absolute. One adult need not watch every rope, ember, animal, and doorway. Separate responsibilities meet through a word at the right moment. The attendant closes the screen to its resting position. The watch lantern grows smaller beyond the seam, then disappears around the lane. An animal shifts against its tether beyond the screens. The ring gives a low metal sound, followed by a scrape of hoof on ground. The attendant recognizes the direction. It comes from the supply side, not from the household passage. She stops with one hand near the lamp hood and listens. The animal breathes, moves once more, and settles. No repeated pull follows. No handler calls out. The watchkeeper, farther along the lane, does not return. A large camp never becomes perfectly quiet. Canvas carries breathing, low voices, vessels, footsteps, and animals finding a more comfortable stance. The task is to distinguish a sound that resolves from one requiring action. The attendant waits through several breaths. The tether ring remains still. She places the lamp hood down and returns to the bedding. The pause has not opened a new problem. It has confirmed that none is present. Beyond the screen, the animal's breathing becomes part of the night's regular sound. Inside, the lamp gives a smaller circle of light than before. The attendant smooths one edge of the cover and leaves the rest untouched. Her work continues to narrow. No rope, ember, passage, or animal now asks for immediate handling. The room can return to the quiet arrangement already made. The attendant returns inside and lowers the lamp wick. The bright edge retreats from the roof first, then from the outer wall, leaving only the bedding, water vessel, and entrance clearly visible. She checks the room in that narrowing circle. The serving cloth is folded. Bowls are covered. Packing cords lie beside the wall. The path to the entrance remains open. The lamp stands away from canvas and bedding. A hand reaches from the bedding for water, finds the cup where it was placed, and returns it without another light being raised. The arrangement has proved useful. Outside, the watch lantern crosses one seam and moves on. The banked ember gives no visible glow from here. The attendant turns the wick a final fraction. The flame steadies below the rim. Nothing is being made grander. Each object is losing visual importance as its task is completed. The vessels need not be admired. They need to remain covered. The rope need not be explained. It needs to hold. The bedding needs only clear ground beneath it. She sits near the entrance for a moment, listening to the room settle around the low lamp. The remaining objects form a small practical circle, and every one of them is already in its place. Packing cords are placed beside the folded bedding. Their loops are loose enough to open easily and gathered tightly enough not to spread across the floor. The attendant knows they will be needed when cloth walls become rolls and rooms become loads. Keeping them here connects rest with the next departure without asking anyone to begin that work tonight. She places a folded outer cloth beside the cords. The arrangement will allow bedding to be wrapped before the floor covering is lifted. Rest comes from completing known tasks, not from pretending the city is permanent. The tent can be temporary, and still hold a well-ordered night. The lamp reveals the chords, then the light lowers beyond them. A vessel at the entrance catches one dull reflection. The screen remains closed. Canvas above gives a slight movement and returns. The retied corner holds. The attendant checks nothing farther away. The water station, animal lines, public lanes and offices belong to other adults now. Her responsibility has contracted to the room and its covered opening. She touches the top cord to confirm the bundle will not roll. It stays. The next packing has been made easier by one small preparation. The present night has been made easier because the preparation is finished. She withdraws her hand and leaves the cords beside the bedding. The attendant sits until the household's breathing becomes even. She does not count the sounds or search for meaning in them. She remains long enough to know that no one needs water, another cover, or help at the entrance. The lamp rests at its lowest useful flame. Its light no longer reaches the roof. A vessel cools beside the wall. Packing cords remain near the folded cloth. Beyond the screen, the watchkeeper's steps pass once and fade. The attendant's ordinary goal is complete when nothing else requires immediate handling. Completion is not silence. An animal breathes outside. Canvas shifts faintly. Another household murmurs and settles. She adjusts the edge of one cover, then keeps her hands still. The room has travelled, been raised, furnished, used for an evening, and prepared for rest. Its temporariness does not make the actions inside less domestic. People still place water within reach, clear the way to an entrance, and wait for breathing to ease. The lamp flame lowers of its own accord. The attendant remains seated for another moment, then leans back against the folded outer cloth. No new duty appears. The room holds its arrangement. Her part of the night has become waiting, and waiting can now give way to rest. The attendant covers the lamp. Darkness enters the room in one gentle change, leaving only a thin line of light at the hood's edge. Outside, the banked cooking place keeps a smaller glow beneath ash. The watch lane remains legible when a lantern passes, then darkens again after it turns. The attendant checks the covered lamp by touch at its base. It stands steady. She moves her hand away. Bedding, vessels, packing cords, entrance and screen remain in the positions already chosen. Nothing new is added to the room. A low voice beyond the canvas stops. An animal breathes. The rope at the outer corner gives one faint sound as the air cools, then holds. The watch lantern returns along the far lane. Its light reaches the lower edge of the screen but not the interior. The guarded opening remains quiet. The attendant lies down near the folded cloth. Her last waking view is not a painted ceiling or stone wall. It is the small covered edge of a lamp and the darker shape of canvas above it. The banked glow outside is almost gone. The lane continues under other adults' care. Inside, the household has no further task. The covered lamp keeps its place, and the tent becomes dark. The attendant lets the ropes ease in the cooler air and makes one final circuit of the room. The lamp is covered. Packing cords lie beside the folded cloth. Vessels stand where a hand can find them before dawn, and the entrance remains clear. Outside, the watch lantern passes along the lane without stopping. Its light briefly outlines a seam, a peg, and the curve of a loosened tether, then moves on. Canvas carries the muted breathing of nearby households. Beyond the screens, an animal shifts once and settles. The banked cooking glow has narrowed beneath ash. No one treats the quiet as perfect or permanent. It is simply the result of completed tasks. A rope checked, an ember covered, bedding placed away from the entrance, a passage kept free. The attendant sits for a little while longer. Tomorrow, these walls may become rolls of cloth, these rooms may become baggage, and this ordered ground may show little beyond peg holes and trampled lines. Tonight, none of that needs to be performed. The moving city is allowed to be still because a few adults remain attentive at its edges, and many others have put down the work they can safely leave. The last visible lantern turns behind a screen. Dark cloth rests above quiet earth. Rope, canvas, animal, lamp and ground remain together, familiar and sufficient. The story closes there, with no further task asking to be begun. Canvas holds the last warmth of the covered lamp, rope keeps its line from cloth to peg, and the ground beneath remains the same ground that received the first measure in darkness. No hand reaches for a mallet now, no cord asks to be tightened. The poles stand where they were left. Beyond the screen, a lantern moves along the known lane. Its light touches one seam, one peg, and a narrow strip of earth, then passes onward. An animal breathes near loosened straps. The sound rises and falls behind the cloth. Inside, bedding, vessels, and packing cords remain in their places. Canvas, rope, lamp, animal, and ground stay together while the room grows dimmer. A lantern appears once beyond the screen. It travels from one edge of the cloth to the other, making the lower seam visible before the light grows smaller. The rope does not move. The peg keeps its dark outline against the earth. For a moment, the lantern reaches the covered lamp inside and leaves a faint reflection on its rim. Then the lane turns, and the reflection is gone. Canvas returns to shadow. The ground beneath it loses detail. The animal beyond the loosened straps continues its slow breathing. Nothing follows the lantern. Its passage settles into the same darkness already held by cloth, cord, bedding, and earth. An animal breathes near the quiet cart. The strap beside it lies eased, no longer carrying the weight of the road. Each breath reaches the canvas as a low sound and fades there. A rope runs from the outer screen to the peg. The line remains steady. Beneath it, the ground shows no more than a dark patch where feet and wheels have passed. Inside, the covered lamp gives almost no light. The folded cloth and packing cords are only shapes beside the bedding. The animal shifts once, then rests again. Canvas, rope, lamp, and earth receive the sound without another movement. The banked ember dims beneath ash. Its small edge of red becomes narrower, then lower. Nearby, the covered lamp remains dark. The lantern has already gone beyond the screen. Canvas hangs above the ground. Rope lies along its familiar pull. An animal breathes beyond the cloth, close to loosened straps and the settled cart. The ember gives one faint glow to the earth around it. Nothing is carried into that light. Nothing is taken away. Ash covers the remaining red. The same canvas, cord, animal, lamp, and ground stay where the night left them. Ground waits beneath ropes that will later be lifted, though no hand reaches for them now. The pegs remain set. Canvas hangs in the shape made during the night of work. The entrance is dark, and the lane beyond carries no lantern. Near the quiet loads, an animal rests with its strap loosened. Farther away, the ember has lowered beneath ash. The covered lamp gives no light. Canvas, rope, lamp, animal, ground. The rope keeps its line. The canvas keeps its shadow. The animal keeps its slow breath. The ground remains under all of them. The final trace of light leaves the ash, and the field waits without another word.